at night. Candyland, the original Candyland was built on the outside of the Midway, and it was later relocated inside, but that was, they had the popcorn cakes and all that sort of thing that were the great treats. A pavilion, this was, the park originally had a lot of pavilions like this for eating. This one was expanded and became the Lakeside Cafe. Again, I don't think it's, you can't underestimate the importance of the park attracting groups, whether it be Sunday school groups, picnics, family gatherings. The Carroll family, a big family out of Hatboro, had their reunions here. I think they still hold their reunions, obviously not at the park. In 1903, the GAR, the Philadelphia area GAR, came and had an encampment, and they would come back for a number of years thereafter. This is around that second lake. This was the coal mine ride that was built, and the Biograph Theater has become the Willowgraph Theater. But that's the Midway in 1904. That's the ladies' pavilion, which is basically they didn't have porta pots. They made a nice thing for ladies, and when you got close to the grounds, it was restricted to women and children only, and that building would stand until the end of the park, although not for its original purpose. Behind it, you can see the casino. This is the administration building. From that lodge, they moved within the park into a colonial-style brick building. I just love the inside of that with all those pictures on the wall. In 1904, they built a line from Wayne Junction in Germantown through Glenside up to the park. And when they did that, they redesigned how the trolleys came in and out of the park. This is the power plant that had been there to provide power, and it was greatly expanded for the 1904 coming of the trains, but this is the what the grounds look like in 1905. This is Easton Road here. You're looking south. Old Welsh Road's up in here somewhere, and your Davisville Road is over here. And so this whole area where the Olive Garden is and the AT&T store and Papa John's, that whole section was basically became the rail yards for the park. You would get off the trains here, and you would go under there into a tunnel. And there's the tunnel for when you came out. Again, we're looking north now to the Olive Garden. That's where this building is where the Willowgrove Bank would have been. So they were able to handle, the goal was to be able to handle 10 to 20,000 people and get them out safely within an hour after the concerts. And they wanted to be able to do it smoothly so that people didn't leave the concert early and so you didn't get a panic of the crush. Here's the tunnel when you came into the park under Easton Road. 2 new rides appeared that year. One was the airships, which is this. It started with sort of gondolas and graduated to airplanes when Charles Lindbergh flew. And during World War II, they gussied it up to look like warplanes, and then it became spaceships later on. That ride lasted for a while. And the other that we all know as the Alps, but started life as the Mountain Scenic Railway, was the other ride that premiered in 1905. The shed might not be familiar to you. That was ripped down in the 30s. And there was a scenic palace back here that the ride went out to. So quite an elaborate thing. That first carousel that we saw that had the heavy Victorian shingling, they opened it all up. They knocked out all the interior walls. They put the columns on. And in 1906, they put in a Philadelphia Toboggan Company carousel. And there's a nice picture of it. This would stay here until 1922. They had another carousel for 5 years to 27, and then this building became the Tilt-A-Whirl ride. And then the park was down to one carousel, which was the second carousel building. Venice premiered in 1907, built at the cost of $100,000. It was a water ride. That's what it looked like when you got on. I love this postcard. I mean, there's a couple of these fun little stories that go with the park. This is one, and we'll have another shortly. This airship, Lincoln Beachley, was this great aeronaut back in the early days of flight, and he appeared all over the country. In July of 1907, he wowed the Elks Convention in Philadelphia. 500,000 people gathered around City Hall as he flew around there, and then he came out and docked at Willow Grove Park for 3 weeks and went up every day that it wasn't too windy. He did go up his first day, and it was a little windy, and he said everybody was stone silent until he landed. Here's the other fun little story. That Kemble farm that is to the west of Willow Grove Park, the Kembles got this great idea that they could open a park right on the other side of that trolley line that went right down their property line. And so the whole air of refinement that this park was trying to cultivate was sort of the antithesis of Coney Island. And so what's he call his place? Coney Island at Willow Grove. And he has some games and that sort of thing, and he gets a Ferris wheel from the Roebling Company in New York. The park buys him out after 2 years on a 20-year lease. It's like, shut him down. The Ferris wheel ran for a couple weeks in the 1906 season and broke, and the park said, we're not fixing it. So what they did was they put lights on it, and they plugged it in every night. They would take that down for the giant racing coaster, the Chase Through the Clouds, after the 1910 season, but from the latter part of 06 through 10, it shone like a wonderful flower. I have 3 pictures here to show you this park at night from postcards, not great images in color. Again, one of the things is that not a lot of people had electricity, and clearly stores. I mean, it's not like Philadelphia or New York or Broadway, you know, and we're sort of we get overpowered with all this light and, you know, we don't like it. Back in those days, there was none of this. And so when these guys plugged in for free, because they owned the traction company and the electric with it, plugged in the park at night, it was like this fairyland that nobody had ever seen before. So it's sort of hard to understand the impression that this made, but it was really quite a thing. Here's another, again, they've added a little color in the fountain, but if you've ever been out to the fountain shows at Longwood Gardens, you sort of have to imagine that that's what it looked like. So it must have, especially on a beautiful night, it must have been a glorious place to be. Back to the crazes in America, automobiles became the craze. 1909, they built the automobile race course. You actually got in a car that ran around the track for those that couldn't afford their own. 1911, they build the giant racing coaster. Here's the Nickel Scenic, the carousel's here, and this is the Midway, and sort of where that Ferris wheel was, they built this enormous racing coaster. It was the largest on the East Coast at the time they built it. And just to give you a sense, again, this is just one of these pictures you have to love. I mean, here's the people. Just to give you a sense of the structure that supported that ride. That operated until 30 or 31. Here's a view from the top of the racing coaster back at the park in 1914. The automobile died, dancing came in. There was a dancing craze, so they built Danceland in 1916. It was 10 cents a couple. You could sit in the balcony for a nickel. Gentlemen were not allowed in without a lady. They didn't want you chasing down the babes. Next door was the Crazy Village, put in 1916, and that operated until 28. 1925 was the last year that the park was owned by the traction company, and it was sort of the end of the free musical concert era. By then, entertainments had changed, technology had changed, and people no longer felt the need to come out and hear John Philip Sousa. and all the other greats who played at the park. This is a 1925 aerial view of the park. It's a little dark. Can you see that well enough? There's the giant racing coaster. This is Moreland Road. This is Easton. That's Old Welsh. Here's the band shell with the pavilion. Here's the flying machine, the Alps, or Mountain Scenic still. Venice, Danceland, the carousel. The second carousel's here. The casino's here. You can see the train line coming in and linking around and dropping off, and out they went. And then they would have gone down Rockwell for the Route 6, or they would have gone down York Road. We'll see this picture later. In 1926, Meyer Davis leased the park on a 10-year lease. Meyer Davis made his name as a socialite orchestra band leader, and he was a great promoter. He got the park. That's a picture of him standing. He sort of went for the sizzle because the old fuddy-duddies who liked the concerts had moved on. They had ankle contests and, you know, best leg of the month and that sort of thing. Here's a thing for Miss Philadelphia. 1928, he builds the Thunderbolt. That will go up to 70 miles an hour. That will be the fastest ride that's built at Willow Grove. And it's 1928, if you want to look forward and understand why. We also have here in this picture the firemen. Every year from 1915 on, the firemen would gather here. They would have competitions in the lake for getting the hoses out, how far they could shoot the hoses, the whole 9 yards. This is part of the competition going on. In 1929, in December 20th, there was an early morning fire at Willow Grove Park. It started in the machine shop, and it burned to the ground Venice. We are standing in the middle of Venice, looking around us. It also took out the old theater building, which had become a whirlaball. This is the second carousel, which was damaged. Here's the Alps, which was damaged. That's the administration building. Looking the other way, there's the ladies' pavilion. There's a giant racing coaster over here. Here's your Thunderbolt. That was damaged. Meyer Davis will reopen the park in 1930, and then he will exit his 10-year lease and turn it back to the traction company.